Best is leftists. Sam, have you talked to any of your friends in the entertainment industry and encouraged them to speak out? I was disappointed to see Sarah Silverman post some ignorant things lately. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been terribly excited at some of the things I've seen posted. Some people, I think, who have a sort of more visceral connection, who have family members who are in the area, they have certain reactions, and I don't love it. It's people are extremely emotional right now, and I'm not making excuses for anybody or whatnot, but again, like my project is to try and get as many people as I can to sort of understand the dynamic that is going on in Israel and in Palestine, and the idea of like, this Zionist project, maybe we need to take a look at it and be a little bit more skeptical about what fuels it. And that's not to mitigate the horror of what Hamas did, and it's certainly not to mitigate the horror of, it's not a mom or a dad does not care how you kill their baby or their kid. A kid does not care how their mother or father was killed. I mean, I obviously they care, but at the end, the pain is just as great. And I think, I've said this before because I've been talking about this conflict, in a professional setting for going on 20 years now. And I don't engage really, or I try not to, in the sort of who's more or less moral, whose killing is, more or less barbaric. Like in my experience, as soon as you start to engage in the sort of like who has the moral high ground in these arguments, all you get is what we have had for decades now. And
but I think framing the issue of, ending apartheid as a moral one is not. I agree with you on which killings are more immoral. I mean, you can't make that case. Like, I saw a video of someone taking down the missing person posters that people were putting up of Israelis that were taken hostage. I find that to be disgusting. Like, you can't make that. You can't engage in this in that way. And it's tribal and it's wrong. But in terms of the broader context of the issue, I think the issue of Palestinian liberation outside of the violence we're seeing right now is a moral one, right?
I mean, I'd say it's a historical one. Like, I think we need to put this in the context of the broad history and the structures that we're seeing. And yeah, like if ultimately, like we make a conclusion about those structures saying this is immoral, but also look at what it's producing, which is these cycles of violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't see a moral problem with it. I'm talking as a rhetorical tool to try and argue in this moment. But I think broadly speaking, the idea of apartheid, the idea of colonization, the idea of deprivation and whatnot are, moral precepts. But in terms of like trying to argue what should happen in the future, I assume a certain sort of like, I'm not going to argue with a guy who says they're animals and we should chew them up and, use them as, as fertilizer and talking about people essentially.
Right.
I mean, I'm not having arguments with those people. I'm having, I'm talking about engaging for the most part on this show, like there's two different modes in which we function. One, engaging people who are sort of like politically adjacent and trying to convince them. And, anybody who's going to be politically adjacent to the show, I think on some level, at the very least, thinks they believe that in the humanity of Palestinians. And I think sometimes, like, with the opportunity with those people, there's a way to point out, like, hey, maybe you need to examine that. I mean, you had an example before the show you were talking about where I think, like, sometimes, like, people can see.
I had a very, very, very difficult conversation with somebody close to me, and I had to say, you have to examine the way that you view Muslim people, and brown people more broadly. And just like to the question, sorry to cut you off, Sam, but about Sarah and other celebrities sharing this, what I think is really annoying, and you're not on like Instagram, so you don't see this as much, but the celebrities that are sympathetic to Palestinian liberation and what's going on in Gaza, I would say, are being told by all their PR teams to shut the hell up. Like the public voices right now, unfortunately, from some public figures, are pushing a good amount of Zionist propaganda. And then there's like a few celebrities like Gigi Hadid, who's Palestinian, who speaks out about it. But I guarantee very cautiously. And then the Israeli government's getting into a Twitter war with her, like insane people. But like just because people aren't speaking out right now doesn't mean that there isn't growing support and understanding of what's happening. People are terrified. They have PR teams that are telling them, don't say a thing, right? And what's annoying is that there seems to be very little consequences for completely reckless misinformation being spread by certain celebrities and other public figures about like what is actually happening in Gaza as long as it is supportive of Israel. But there's an entirely obvious, I would say, chilling effect of any Palestinian support. And like
Israel is tweeting about Greta Thunberg now because she had
said solidarity with Palestine. She had an autistic emotional support octopus plushie in the background of the photo. And there are like people saying that was an anti-Semitic symbol that she's secretly putting in there. We're talking like QAnon levels of derangement here, and the picking apart of anybody who wants to say something positive publicly about Palestine. That is, I mean, I printed this out too, that the Harvard students that are getting doxxed right now by for putting out that letter in support of Palestine. They're putting their faces on billboards, sending their information out to potential employers. They've had their job offers have been rescinded right now. Like this chilling effect is real. So my point is just that it feels very alone right now. I feel alone in many ways in certain conversations, but there are a lot of people that are sympathetic behind the scenes, but they're afraid to say something because of like your family members are going to get doxxed, or a right-wing group is going to put a photo up of you outside in Harvard Square where you go to college and call you anti-Semitic so all of your classmates can see. So that's the situation right now.
I mean,
by the way, free speech warriors. Where's Barry Weiss? Where's Barry Weiss?
Taibbi's really upset
that
people thought the hospital might have been bombed by Israel.
Where's Greenwald? Where's Charlie Kirk?
He's tweeting. At least to be fair, Greenwald's
okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I should.
But I mean, look, there's no doubt, and this is, I think, when I was in Vegas, like I was saying, like within the first day, I knew the face. I could identify like 3 different IDF communications, people. They've been on TV so much, and it has always been. This has always been the case. It is. I mean. The interesting thing from my perspective is like feels a lot less isolating than during the Iraq War era because there's just more dissent. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is there's more sort of like bloodlust and insanity in some respects because the Israeli government is even more right wing than it has ever been.
Yep.
And they don't even feel like they need to dress up what they're talking about, and they can be a lot more sort of like vicious. And frankly, there's a lot of settlers, both ethno-nationalists and religious fundamentalists, who are much more vicious. Which is not to say that this has not been an ongoing thing, but like there's no sense that they even feel like they have to hide their agenda or be quiet about it. But at the same time, I'm also hearing a lot more dissent about this than, and it's not apples to oranges. I mean, it's not apples to apples. But I think there's, I've been saying for years. Do you remember Indie Mike? We would have Matt remembers, but years ago I would have debates with this guy on like just the email thread with a bunch of people, and I was like, dude, if you're concerned about Israel, the biggest threat to Israel is what they are doing.
Exactly. They
are doing, and what it's going to do in this country, because it is just a matter of time in this country, and I still contend that it is. It is just a matter of time before there is a critical mass, and we see it with younger people, a critical mass who understands, who sees this conflict in a different perspective. When I was 10, there was no reporting on the Deir Yassin massacre. There was no social media that was talking about what was happening in 1948. This is all
historians
stuff.
hadn't even got there in the 80s.
Exactly. And we had a version of the Dunning School in terms of the founding of Israel. And there was no sort of like, you didn't hear reporting about the Irgun or the Stern Gang as terrorist organizations. All you heard about was that Israel had been attacked by 6 different countries, and it was a big David and Goliath story, and things started to both change in the way that Israel approached that region, and also simultaneously a growing understanding of like how the country was founded. And the further you get away from that, and the further you get away, and there's more history about how that country was founded. And I don't believe that you can go backwards in that way any more than we can say like the United States should essentially not exist anymore.
We can't.
And we can't.
Israel exists and it will exist.
But the way in which that country deals with a greater understanding of that past and deals with the path forward, it's untenable. I mean, at the final analysis, it is untenable. And the question isn't, will there ever be a single country or a resolution to this? There will be at one point. It's just a question of how many people have to die and be immiserated between now and then. And it could be decades from now or not, but it's not. This is untenable. And by die, I'm not even just talking about within the context of the Palestinian population or the Israeli population. I mean, this has the potential to expand, and I sort of feel like we're at a much more tenuous point in that regard than we've ever been. But it's interesting. There was an era where it was like, if you're Arab, why don't the Arabs take them in? And we live in an era now where we understand like that is pretty offensive to say that because they're Arab that you can expect a country to be like, well, we will take them in. Like, I don't know, like, would we ever say that about Ukraine? Like,
why do they have to be taken in?
Well,
but that's
my point is like
Jordan,
we would not. Yeah. But my point is like to get people to understand the sort of inhumanity of that talking point, which it's been a talking point for my entire life. would you say, why isn't Poland just taking in all the Ukrainians? They're all white. They're all Caucasians.
That's a good point.
Like, I mean, or they're all Christian. Like what? Like, what?
Let Russia take the land. I mean, they could just go to Poland.
And I think like it has been just a, you know, I think it was effective for a long time, but I think like there's a broadening understanding of our shared humanity, at least in some circles, and that's why we're starting to see this pushback and why we see this difference in the polling in terms of like the way
Young
that people support.
Yep. So hope we answered that I am.